Welcome to the AVAIL podcast, where we dig deep and talk about the art of leadership. My name is Virgil Sierra, and today we're sitting down with Pastor Dave Stone. For 30 years, Dave preached at Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. During his last 13 years as senior pastor, the church grew exponentially from 18,000 at one campus to 27,000 at 7 campuses. In this episode, Dave shares about his unique involvement in a 2023 faith-based film entitled Ordinary Angels, starring Hilary Swank. It's a remarkable story that takes you on an inspiring journey of faith, everyday miracles, and ordinary angels. So, lean in everybody, and let's get started. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the AVAIL podcast, where we dig deep and talk about the art of leadership. And we also talk about awesome things that are happening. Today is not going to disappoint. We are sitting with none other than Pastor Dave Stone, who's a great leader. And in addition to that, is going to talk to us about a really special project that he is directly connected to. Pastor Dave, it's good to have you on the AVAIL podcast. How are you feeling, sir?
Hey, I am doing great, Virgil. It's my honor and privilege. I appreciate everything you do. Thanks for having a heart for leadership. And I love the fact that you give tools and resources that truly help church leaders, Christian leaders, know how to do things a little bit better. But more importantly than that, a lot of your topics touch the heart. They scratch that itch that every Christian leader has. So we appreciate everything that you're doing for the kingdom.
Wow, that's awesome. I appreciate that. I'm excited to talk to you today specifically about this movie, this project that's got, I know it's got a special place in your heart, which is the movie Ordinary Angels. Before we jump into that conversation, though, I would love for our AVAIL audience to just lean in a little bit, get to know who you are. Can you tell us, maybe in a couple minutes, who is Pastor Dave Stone?
That's an interesting question. I'm glad my wife's not here to answer it. So I'll take a crack at it. I grew up in a preacher's home, and I was attracted to ministry because my dad was the same person at home as he was in the pulpit. And that's what attracted me to want to follow in his footsteps. And so I preached for a number of years, had a youth ministry, was a recruiter at a Bible college for 4 years as well. So I had about 8 years of pouring into young people. And then from the age of 27 to 57, I worked at Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. It's a dynamic, thriving, growing church, a lot of excitement, Spirit of the Lord on the move consistently for 3 decades. And I was the senior pastor for the last 13 and a half of those years. And then I worked with Kyle Eidelman for a number of those years, and I passed everything over to Kyle. Kyle's known as an author and has done countless Bible studies, but Kyle is now leading Southeast Christian, does a tremendous job. And if I'm not on the road preaching somewhere, we are worshiping at Southeast and serving there.
I love that. One of the things we do talk about on this podcast every so often about the importance of solid, healthy transitions. And it seems like that's what you help to spearhead there at your church. But there's something else interesting about you, Pastor Dave, which is you're connected to this new movie. Now, obviously, it depends on when somebody's watching or listening to this podcast. But I know it's scheduled for October 13th, 2023 is the release of Ordinary Angels, a movie that I think is going to capture hearts. Can you tell us a little bit about your real life experience with this story in the movie?
Yeah, so the story is based on something that happened here in Louisville, Kentucky back in 1994, so almost 30 years ago.
Wow.
And there was a gentleman in the city who his kids had some health issues. His wife died. He was probably in his 30s at the time. Ed was probably in his 30s when that happened. Young wife, hadn't been married that many years. And his wife passed away. And it was just shortly after that one of his daughters needed a liver transplant. And
Wow.
so there were mounting medical bills that he had from his wife's illness and her death and her passing. But then also he had two daughters who had some real physical problems as well. And lo and behold, it gets me choked up thinking about it.
Mm.
A gal, Sharon Stevens, who had never met the Schmidt family, didn't know them from Adam. She was a
Mm.
member of Southeast Christian, and she just took it upon herself to be the spearhead within the community to make a difference and to help this family out. And the name of the movie, Ordinary Angels, comes from the fact that there's nothing extraordinary about Sharon or the people who dove in and helped, but instead we can all be ordinary angels, and God can use us to spread that message of light. And that's how God used Sharon in an incredible way. And the movie goes into how she helped that family out. And it culminates with something that happened in January of 1994. And that was the day that they got the phone call that she could have a liver transplant, but she had to be in Nebraska. Little Michelle Schmidt had to be in Nebraska within 6 hours from that call. That wouldn't pose a
Wow.
problem except for the fact that was the largest blizzard in the history of the state of Kentucky. And so we had 2 inches of ice, 17 inches of snow, and sub zero weather for several days in a row. And therein lies another layer of the drama that the movie goes
Wow.
into of how are we going to get this little girl um, all the way to Nebraska in time so that she can make use of this organ that's been donated.
Well, even just hearing that storyline, people say sometimes, "Oh, that sounds like a movie." Well, if that sounds like a movie, but this movie's based on a real story. Now, I'm curious, Pastor Dave. Obviously, I don't know the details, and that's why I want to kind of
Yeah.
ask you a little bit. Is this connected, to the church that you were, at the time that you were pastoring?
Yeah, it is, and I always try not to make too much of that because
Uh-huh.
it really was a community effort. One
Sure.
portion of the story took place at Southeast Christian, but
Mm.
in the big scheme of things, it was the entire community coming together. You read in 1 Corinthians 12, as your Christian leaders are all aware of, where it talks about the body of Christ, and we all have
Hmm.
different functions within it, and we're different members of the body, and that's kind of what we saw play out within the community in the city of Louisville. We were fortunate to get to be on the front end of that, and
Hmm.
actually, the only way that they could get Michelle out of Louisville was by way of helicopter. And so, on short notice, they had to come up with a place to land the helicopter in these terrible conditions. And it ended up being in Southeast Christian Church in our parking lot.
Wow.
And
That's so cool.
I was the first person on the scene. Of course, you're not thinking anything about it. 3 decades ago, you're there, and I was there more accidentally than intentionally. But I think now looking back, God gave me that opportunity to kind of help people know where to go, what to do, to show some leadership in that setting. And it was about 20 minutes later that the helicopter landed in our parking lot, and they didn't even have room for Ed, the father. They had to just take the little girl up in the helicopter.
Wow.
And it's still an emotional sight to think about and to see. And the
Hmm.
movie at the end, spoiler alert here, but at the end, they actually show footage from that day from the helicopter coming and landing in the
Wow.
church parking lot. So, really, it was a community effort, but it was
Hmm.
a beautiful picture of the church and the neighbors and the community being the hands and feet of Christ, and really just trying to do the next right thing for someone that was in need.
Yeah, you know why I love this story. Well, and first of all, I can't wait to watch this movie. I have not seen the movie yet. I can't wait. I've read up a little bit about it. I saw a trailer, and I'm intrigued by really being able to eat some popcorn and watch it in the theaters
Yeah.
with my family. But here's a question I have for you as a pastor, because you've been pastoring for a few decades in that region. And how does it feel how does it feel for a pastor when you see the church be the church, right? And how does that impact the community?
Well, there are a lot of great churches around the country, and also here in the Louisville area. And there's a lot of Bible believing churches that really just want to hold up God's word and look for opportunities to flesh that out.
Hmm.
One of my favorite themes about this movie is the fact that you leave with a good taste in your mouth about church.
Yeah.
And so the person who is a non-believer walks in,
Hmm.
and maybe when they leave, their mind will be more open to, oh, gosh, churches do a lot of good things out there,
Yeah.
and here's an example of it. Um, I like the concept that the church showed up, because
Yes.
whenever there's a community need or a community crisis, whatever, even if it's not that glamorous or not that exciting, um, if the church shows up, great things happen.
Hmm.
I always talk about the fact that all we did was shovel. It doesn't take a doctorate degree or anything like that in order to. All you do
Hmm.
is you hear there's a need, you grab a shovel, you dive in, and I think lots of times Christian leaders will understand this. I think lots of times as church members, our flock, they
Yeah.
they think, oh, because I can't do something big or because I can't do everything, I won't do something.
Hmm.
And yet God is counting on us to serve, to look for those things. There's a church, I think it might be First Baptist in Orlando, that as you leave the parking lot, it says something to the effect of, the worship service is done. Now it's time to depart to serve. And so you're going out to serve and to worship wherever you go each and every day for the next 167 hours until you come back the next week. And that's where we can really be Christ's hands and feet. And the church can really show people, oh, there's something unique and distinctive that makes us different than the world. And part of it is the fact that the person that we follow said that he did not come to be served, but he came to serve and to give his life
Mm.
as a ransom for many.
Yeah, that's good. I love that point, Pastor Dave, because sometimes and I'm speaking generally, the church can be seen as not in a positive light. Sometimes it's seen as the angry church. They're against everything they're against. Sometimes it's seen as the isolated church. It's just them and their holy huddle. Sometimes it's the absent church. They're not here for anything that matters. And so being the fact that this is a story that it shows, man, the church was present, being what the church is called to do. I think that's awesome. Talking about the movie Ordinary Angels, which I love the title of the movie. As a pastor, B, as someone who's kind of helping to push forward this project, what do you hope audiences are going to take away from this film?
Hmm. Well, I hope that there's several main themes. So there's several things that I hope that they'll walk away with. One of them is the fact that the gal who gets involved, Sharon, in the movie, she struggles with alcohol. And I
Mm-hmm.
think lots of times Satan holds us hostage by thinking that we can't be used until we get our life all together. We hear that
Ooh,
as
that's good.
Christian leaders a whole lot when people will say, well, I'd like to come to Christ, but, I can't stand hypocrites in the church. And so I'm going to get my act together. And when I get my act together, then I'll give my life to Christ. And, I want
Mm-hmm.
to look at them and say, if you could get your life together without Christ, then what do you need Jesus for? And so there's a piece of this where Sharon, who's a part of our church, began serving and
Hmm.
actively diving into helping this family out, even though she doesn't have her whole life together at that stage. But she finds healing through helping, and I think
Wow.
lots of times that's what happens is we get in our own narcissistic worlds where everything revolves around us. We measure everything and weigh everything based upon how it affects me.
Right.
And yet, if you look at the early New Testament church, we've all preached through the book of Acts before. You see all these people that they were living together in one accord. They worshiped together daily. They shared what they had. They gave to those who had need. There was this unity that they had. And that's a main theme of the movie is how can we be united rather than divided as communities? And that's something that's important for us, especially in this world that we're a part of with racial discrimination and political polarization.
Yeah, I think this is great. Talk about a good time for a movie like this. I think a movie that inspires community action, community togetherness in a time like you're saying, where there's been so many things that can cause division and separation. I think it's so intriguing to me being being able to be a part of something like this. As you obviously, and we got to be careful with the spoiler alerts, Pastor Dave, but but as a person who kind of lived out this story, right, when it happened, and you were a witness, to this, and then now being on this side,
Hmm.
being part of this team pushing this movie forward, this film, which I believe has the power to impact. Who is this movie for? Obviously there's some serious tones to some of the themes, but there's also a lot of hope and encouragement. So who do you think would be blessed by going to this movie?
Yeah, the language is clean throughout. There's no nudity, of course, or anything like that. There's no violence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there, there is a struggle with alcohol that
Sure.
the character Sharon has in it. You have Ed, the grieving widow, who struggles with being skeptical of God after the
Mm-hmm.
passing of his wife, and now on top of that, all the things going on with his daughter and her needing
Mm.
this liver transplant. So they're real life issues.
Yeah.
It's rated PG, so it didn't get
Mm-hmm.
the PG 13 rating.
Good.
There's the closest problem would be one time she has a health problem and has some blood that she spits up, the little girl, before she's taken to the hospital. Other than that, the alcohol is a theme at the very beginning,
Sure.
but it's dealt with. And I think that the viewings that I've been at, the advanced screenings, there have been kids over the age of 10, and they've loved it. And my
Mm.
grandson, who is 11 years old, was riveted for an hour and 53 minutes and couldn't stop talking about it afterwards. So I think there's a lot of
Wow.
teaching points that can come from it. You have a husband who's lost his wife, so you have the grief piece. You have
Yep.
the questioning of God. Why do bad things happen to good people?
Faith.
Yes, the faith is front and center, and he struggles with his prayer life after this happens. And it's actually going to be his kids that have an impact on him in that arena when it comes to prayer. So there's a
Mm.
lot of teaching themes throughout. Who's it for? I've seen advanced screenings with people of all ages, and
That's
it's
great.
Kingdom Story. They put out Wonder. They put out Jesus Revolution earlier this year. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
this is tested higher than any film that they've ever done. And so I think part of that is because it does touch all segments of the population and everyone can find something out of it. I had teenagers coming to me afterwards, finding things of saying, I want to be more involved in serving. And so there's takeaways that I think everyone can have, regardless of their age.
Yeah, that's good. It sounds like it really is a story that has the potential to reach the whole family. Thankfully, there's not anything as far as ratings that's
Right.
of concern to the families, but it's real life. I want to mention the lead actors, Hilary Swank and Alan Richson. So this is high quality actors and high quality production, which I think is important. I'm curious, Pastor Dave. I'm curious as to your kind of involvement. Have you ever been involved or this close to a film or a production like this? Have you ever been part of one like this?
Yeah, not to this degree, but I
Mm-hmm.
worked with Woodlawn when it came out a number of years ago. Story of a football story from back in the early 1960s. I worked also a little bit with I Can Only Imagine, and
Wow.
and now this one, and the firepower of the actors at the top with Hillary. with Alan Ritchson. Of course, Hillary has won 2 Oscars, and
Yeah.
she is phenomenal. She took a break from acting for 6 years to take care of her father who had cancer.
Wow.
Pretty cool story. Alan
Mm,
Ritchson was just in Fast X and the Fast and Furious. He also plays Jack Reacher on another series. But Alan is a committed Christian. And if you want to follow somebody on Instagram, follow Alan Ritchson because he has a faith and he is very bold about it in Hollywood.
mm.
Nancy Travis is in it as well. Tamala Jones plays Sharon's friend. So you have a list of actors and actresses. Drew Powell
That's so good.
plays the pastor in the film and does a really good job. But I'm a real critic. I don't know if you're listening. Maybe you're riding in the car or you're going through your emails while you're listening to this of angry church members. I don't know what you might be doing right now, but as you're listening, I just want you to know I have been one of these guys who can't stand hokey Christian movies. And I just, there'll always be one scene in a Christian movie that just kind of makes me roll my eyes and go, oh no, I don't feel comfortable inviting such and such to come see it because of that one scene. And let me just tell you, there is nothing like that in this movie. There's nothing hokey. It's excellent acting. They did not shortchange anything. It's really well
Wow.
done. I've got a son that's 28 years old, and I heard him saying to someone afterwards. They asked what he thought about it, and he said, "I thought I wasn't going to like it, and I was going to have to act to my dad like I did like it." But he said, "I loved it, and it was awesome." And I think that's in part because of the tremendous writing that John Gunn
Yeah.
and John Irwin did. I mean, the storylines in this are ones that everyone can latch on to.
Yep.
And as a result of that, I just think that God's going to use it in a powerful way. And it's an
Hmm.
easy invite for Christians because the gospel is not shared, but what it does is it moves the needle when it comes to prayer, when it comes to
Sure.
service, and when it comes to church involvement. And I really think it shows what Jesus wants us all to be in the community.
Yeah, that's good. And I'll just second that I've been so blessed and impressed in a good way by some of the Christian movies that have come out
Yeah.
in this last season, in these last couple of years, that really are extraordinary, including some of the ones you just mentioned. Man, I love that because ultimately, I think if anybody deserves the best, it's the Lord. So I love when stories like this that are full of faith can be brought in a way that there's no distractions. It's hokey free, like you said. I like that. Speaking on what you mentioned, how can churches and communities use this movie, and the experience of your real life story to inspire that same spirit in their communities of helping those in need?
Yeah, I think this is a great for the listeners of the Avail podcast who are involved in Bible study groups. We have a young married couples group that meets at our house on Wednesday nights, and so we'll take all 25 of them that opening weekend of October the 13th because it's positive, it's faith filled, it pushes the family, and it also
Mm,
is light rather than darkness. And all you can do
yeah,
is look at the marquee and look at all the different movies that are advertised, and it's kind of good to have something like this that you say, I could bring my family to this. This would be a place
yeah,
where it's positive peer pressure and it reinforces all the things that I want to be reinforced. So I think one thing churches can do is they can encourage their congregations to go to see it.
hmm,
You referred to Jesus Revolution.
hmm,
Sound of Freedom came out, a little darker program or movie, but incredibly impacting to me
powerful.
because of the topic. It had to be a little bit
Yeah,
darker. And whenever you talk about human trafficking, but we've got this momentum of these two Christian movies, one in the spring and one in the summer. And now we can have this in the fall. And Hollywood sits up and takes notice. Trust me, Lionsgate, who has their name behind this movie, will keep putting Christian movies out as long as they do well. And
Hmm.
Jesus Revolution got Lionsgate's attention, and they could
Yeah.
not believe what a success it was at the box office. And so now they're willing to throw more resources in that direction, which just means we have positive and great alternatives. So, yes, we can encourage the church to come to see it. Also, your listeners can go to ordinaryangels.movie. I've
Hmm.
written 4 sermons that will be available a couple of weeks before the movie comes out, and you can do a 4-week series on it. I encourage you to use anything that I have. The series is called Hope for the Ordinary, and it looks at
Mm.
hope for the hurting, hope for the parents, hope for the skeptic, and hope for the broken. And so it looks at all these different aspects of it. And I've already written the sermons for you. You can use as little or as much as you want. And that will be a resource at ordinaryangels.movie. On top of that, Lionsgate has done something that they've never done before. I picked various scenes to show from the movie, and Lionsgate is giving permission for churches to be able to use that. Typically, you have to wait
Great.
6 months before it comes out on DVD, but after October 13th, they'll let you supplement your sermons by
Mm.
having that video clip. And to all the pastors who are out there, I mean, I've been there. There's times when I'm preaching my heart out and I feel like I'm starting to lose people, and I see some people dozing off. And Virgil, I'll say, I want you to watch this clip from this movie. And I'll show a clip, and all of a sudden, everybody who is daydreaming or counting ceiling tiles or whatever it might be, boom, they are focused. And the
Yep.
second that movie starts, that clip, they are engaged, and now I've got them back again. So there's a lot of
That's cool.
resources that will be out there, and there's a lot of ways you can help. The greatest way is by spreading the word, because most Christian films don't have the marketing budgets that these blockbusters do.
Hmm.
They'll spend tens of millions of dollars in advertising, and we can't do that. Christian movies can't do that, and so it comes down to word of mouth.
Yeah, that's good. What I'm hearing from you is support, support, support. When this movie comes out, depending on when you're watching and hearing this podcast, make sure you go and you support by going and watch this movie. I'm also hearing churches and communities can leverage this message to make an impact even further. You're going to have a sermon series that's going to be available for pastors. Hey, pastors, ministry leaders,
Yeah,
youth pastors, everybody, get ready, because Pastor Dave is going to put some resources in your hands,
that's
and
right.
this is going to help you. It's going to help you kind of spearhead a movement and an initiative of making a difference in your community. I love the thought of that, Pastor Dave. I think that's extraordinary, and I think it's a creative and relevant way to impact our communities, to impact our churches with stories. I mean, this is what Jesus did ultimately, right? When Jesus taught, he didn't just teach from a textbook. He told parables, which are stories that have a lesson. And I can't help but think that movies like these are like modern day parables. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's that passage in the Gospels where it says he said nothing to them without speaking in parables, and it really gives this feel that that was his mainstay whenever he would teach. That's what he was kind of known for. And if you think about it, the reason people love stories is because our need for it is downright physiological. And by that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we even dream in stories. But I'll be out someplace, and after I've preached, a few weeks later, I might run into somebody. They never can tell me what my text was. They never could tell me what the title was. They can't remember any of my points, but they remember the stories, and they'll say, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that sermon where you talked about going on that trip to North Carolina with your family," and immediately we know exactly what they're talking about. Someone said, "Points are for the head, stories are for the heart." And Ordinary Angels goes straight to the heart, and it's a great story that people can play off of. and can build a bridge to the Gospels quite easily.
Yeah, that's good. I want to reiterate the website. Can you reiterate the website?
Yeah. Ordinaryangels.movie.
Yes, Ordinary
Ordinaryangels.movie. And you
Angels.
can go there, and if you have not seen the movie or heard about it, just check out the trailer. Like Virgil said,
Hmm.
I learn a lot by trailers. Trailers actually summarize everything into 2 minutes. And
Hmm.
when I watched that trailer, I was hooked already because I knew it was a type of story that I would want to see. I love something that's based on a true story.
Yeah, I agree. Those are usually, personally, my favorite movies. So you guys heard it, ordinaryangels.movie. That's where you can find out a little bit more about this movie specifically. And we want and expect everybody to get out there to the theaters and watch this movie. And then even afterwards, make sure you tell people about it. I wanted to ask Pastor Dave, if people want to connect with you and know more about you, are you on social media, or how can people connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm not on there as much as I used to be, but I'm also on Instagram. Both handles for both places is Dave Stone 920, and so I'm pretty easy to find on there, and they can reach out to me there as well.
That's so cool. Now, before I want to mention one thing, Pastor Dave, you mentioned about Ordinary Angels, that movie. I'll mention real quick for our Avail audience. If you have not subscribed to the Avail Journal, which is a Christian leadership magazine, it's the best. It's awesome. Make sure you go to availjournal.com. There's a free trial subscription that we want to offer you. Availjournal.com. Would you agree, Pastor Dave, that resources for leadership are key?
And I'm still old school, so I love the magazines. I still tear things out. I still keep them in files for upcoming sermons. And you look at a Christian magazine like that, and you're always
Mhm.
going to find something. You're going to find an illustration. You're going to find a story that you can share. To continue that story
Mhm.
thought, you're going to find things that you can utilize in your own ministry. Not to mention some tips that can help you grow personally when it comes to your faith in Christ and your own relationship with Him. Lots of times people think, well, that person's a Christian leader or they're a minister. They don't struggle with their quiet time. Well, I struggle with things like that, and I need all the help I can get. So, any resource like that is one that I want in my hands.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, before we get to maybe like a final thought or nugget, I want to ask this is kind of the kid in me. Do any of your grandkids, do they see you as a movie star because you're connected to this movie somehow, or what?
There is a character with my name in the movie that is a pastor. I still to this day I have no idea who wrote that into the script because it was in there years and years ago. And this is a movie that's been toyed with for almost 15 years. And pretty
Wow.
cool story how it came about. But I don't think they'll see me as a movie star. And Brad Pitt did not play me, Virgil. But they probably do think it's cool. And
Yeah.
so the bottom line is, if if something puts a good taste in a person's mouth about church, then
Yeah.
I am all for it. And there's been so many stereotypical preachers that we've seen in sitcoms and in movies, and they're either judgmental, they're so out
Yeah.
of touch with things, and that's not the case with this. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited to see how God uses it to build the church.
Very good. Before my final question, these are just kind of quick moment, like quick response
Mhm.
questions. All right, Pastor Dave, just a quick
Yeah,
response.
I got you.
What do you like to do for fun?
I love to play golf. I'm, I'm not
Good.
I'm not great at it, but I love it. And you can play terrible, but if you hit a good shot on 18, boy, you're ready to come back.
Yes, sir. What makes you laugh?
Oh well, grandkids do. I like watching old sitcoms, and so some of my favorites are watching old ones like Everybody Loves Raymond. I love The
Uh-huh.
Office. I'm an Office fan, and I'm a Seinfeld fan. So any of the three of those, you can
Uh-huh.
say a word, and I'm right there with you.
Yeah. What makes you hopeful about the future?
Hmm. I think it's seeing younger generation. It's seeing younger Christians, younger Christians who are passionate about their faith,
Yes.
and they don't play at church. It's not something that they do for 1 hour on the weekend. It
Hmm.
truly is what their heart beats for, and so that gives me hope for the future. Is seeing that there are younger people who are passionate about Christ.
That's good. Me too. Me too. All right, let's wrap this up. We're on the final stretch. Pastor Dave, what's a final nugget or a final thought you want to leave on our Avail audience's heart?
Well, I'm gonna change gears from talking about the Ordinary Angels movie and just let me just speak to Christian leaders out there. I do mentoring with. I work with a group called the Ascent Leader, and the Ascent Leader, they have cohorts and they pour into younger pastors with older pastors, and I just have a burden for the young pastors and Christian leaders who are listening to this, the men and women who are slugging it out and serving the Lord, and maybe they're in a setting where they don't get a lot of thanks, they don't get a lot of appreciation. I just want to
Mm,
say to you, let us not grow weary in doing what is right, for after a while we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't get discouraged and if we don't give up. And I want you to hold on to that. It's been a tough few years of ministry. This statistics that talk about the loneliness among Christian leaders in recent years has just kind of been off
mm,
the chart. And I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to have some Christian friends. I want you to find some people in an affinity group that are other people who are Christian leaders who might go through some of the same struggles that you do, and work at those relationships. Satan would like nothing more than to isolate you from one another.
mm-hmm.
And one of the great things that I see with the Avail podcast and what Virgil's doing is it's uniting, kind of like what we talked about
Yeah.
in the movie. It's uniting leaders, and when we come together and realize that God is using us, and we're not alone in our struggles and in the challenges and pressures of ministry, that's when I think God can do His best work. So lean on one another. Don't grow weary in doing what's good.
That's good. Thank you for that word, Pastor Dave. On behalf of our Avail team, Dr. Sam Chand, Martijn Van Tilburg, everybody who's behind the scenes here at Avail, we just want to say thank you for doing what you've done, doing what you do. Thank you for bringing our attention to this movie, or Ordinary Angels. I love the fact that we can put this out there for our Christian leaders to not only consume, but to share with all the people that they lead. We honor you and we bless you, and we're thankful for your leadership.
Well, thank you, Virgil. It's been a privilege for me, and keep up the good work because you're doing a great work. Don't come down from it.
Thank you, sir. Hey, everybody. We hope you've been blessed by this episode of the Avail podcast. As always, we're talking about important things. In this case, you got to go to ordinaryangels.movie. Find out more information if you haven't already, and share it with somebody because this movie is going to bless your life. On behalf of Avail, my name is Virgil Sierra, lead pastor of Vertical Church, Iglesia Vertical here in South Florida. We are one church, two languages. I'm your host for this Avail podcast every single week, coming out with a new, fresh episode for you to encourage you in your leadership journey and put resources in your hands. Catch you next time right here on Avail. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Avail podcast with our guest, Dave Stone. You can find out more about the movie by going to ordinaryangels.movie and connect with Dave Stone on social media. For more leadership resources, check us out at theartofleadership.com. And make sure to claim your free trial subscription of the AVAIL Journal at availjournal.com. As always, I'm your Avail podcast host, Virgil Sierra. Muchas gracias. Thank you for connecting with us to learn the art of leadership here at the AVAIL podcast.